Welcome back to our In Focus discussion tonight. You know, electric vehicles, they've been around longer than gas-powered ones, if you can believe this. Back in the 1830s in Scotland, engineers, they were making horseless carriages using batteries. But obviously, it's been the last decade or two that electric cars have really started to make their mark here in modern-day society in the United States. Today, we want to look at the electric car, its future in Utah. What are the benefits, the challenges, and the desire to move to this platform, which a lot of folks are considering or have already done? Joining us first via Zoom is Jeff Miller, General Manager of Mark Miller Subaru. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Happy to be on.
Yeah, it's an exciting topic because everybody drives for the most part. They see the roads. They're interested in what's going to happen next. Let's start with what Subaru's doing with electric vehicles. We hear a lot about Tesla and the Prius, but what is Subaru up to? What's on the slate, and when can we see these cars in Utah?
Yeah, so Subaru right now, we have a plug-in hybrid model in the Crosstrek that's available in CARB states, so in California and states like that we have some access to be able to get into the state of Utah. But our big excitement one is going to be for next spring, where we will have our first EV full electric vehicle, which is going to be a cross product. Ours is going to be called the Solterra, which means sun and earth. And there will also be it's a cross build with Toyota, where Toyota's building their own version and Subaru's building their own version together. And so they'll come out with theirs at the same time. We're hoping for next May.
That is a gorgeous looking vehicle. It's kind of got the Outback look to it, but
yeah,
has
it's
a little
about
bit of
Forester sized, so good sized car. I actually had the pleasure of getting to see it in person last week at a Subaru meeting I went to, and it's a great looking car, and we're really excited about it coming out.
Well, there's a lot to talk about in the car market with the microchip shortage, but I want to stay focused on sort of the future here. The electric car industry, we want to talk about drivers for the EV platform, consumer choice, government regulation. You know, talk about the big picture as far as what the future looks like.
I think it's a joint between consumer choice and the government regulation. I think with the Biden administration coming in, obviously fuel economy standards became front and center, and they kind of came right back into the look for all of the manufacturers. So now they're having to focus on building those fleets back up to be able to hit those standards. And the only way to do it is through electric and through plug-in hybrids and vehicles like that. So that's driving part of the market. Then the other side is that consumers are starting to want it. With gas prices going where they're at, consumers are looking more and more into the electric and the plug-in world. And so I think it's going to be a combination over the next few years to see this market increase from the small market that it is right now.
Well, I think it's just macroeconomics. When people are just sick of spending that much money to fill up their tank, they're like, what are my options? Well, maybe it's a little bit more to get this electric vehicle, but I don't have to spend all that money on gas, right? And now is when everyone's thinking about it.
I was driving one of the plug-in Crosstreks for the last year, and I would get generally about 1,000 miles a tank on that car. On a 13-gallon gas tank, I was getting about 1,000 miles driving that car around. The only time I really used gas was going on the freeway.
So that sort of changed your mentality.
I really do think in the future of electric, it's not going to be a pure electric world. You're still going to see plug-in hybrids in this world, because you're going to still want those people that aren't going to want to give up that comfort of having a gas tank behind them in case they run out of juice.
Right. For these long trips that you hear about, you have to recharge and sort of that anxiety about running low on batteries I've heard about. I don't have an electric vehicle, but I hear about these things. Okay, let's talk about the supply chain for electric vehicles. Where are the batteries manufactured? Are they in the same region as the auto plants? And not to layer too many questions here, but we also have microchips to talk about, which complicates the entire auto industry. Where is everything made, and what do you want to share about what I just asked?
So supply chain is a huge issue, especially right now, just in the auto industry in general with microchips. I mean, and essentially in the battery world right now, as we speak, we'd have the same problems. Is the vast majority of battery production in this world is in Asia. I think there's probably 400, 500 plants that make batteries for cars out there right now, and I think 300 or 400 are in Asia. We have about 30 or 40 in North America, which is a lot better, and it's moving in the right direction. We're getting more battery production into North America, where a lot of these cars are made, but we got a long way to go to catch up. And then the other side of the supply chain is the materials, and that's going to be a big issue in the electric world, is how we're going to get enough lithium, enough carbon, all these different things that go into these batteries, where the cobalt is a big part of it, and they come from all over the world. I think the vast majority of the cobalt comes from Central Africa, which becomes a lot more volatile region depending on what's going on politically.
Wow.
So there's going to be a lot of issues coming together to try and make the number of batteries we need to make this what Biden wants, which I think was 50% of cars to be plug-in or electric by 2030.
So there are a lot of supply chain issues, there are a lot of raw material issues, and we assume that the big companies will figure a lot of this out. But then you think about pricing, right? And if it's really difficult to source this stuff, maybe it's going to be really expensive. When are these vehicles going to come down in price as you look way on the horizon as we become a more electric vehicle society?
That right now, that's the biggest barrier to entry, without question, is that they're just expensive. I mean, to get a car that you could normally buy in a gas-powered car for $20,000, $25,000 new, you're paying $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 for. So we've got a lot of work to do on that side. The good news on it is prices are coming down. And the key to it is the vast majority of the cost in an electric car are the batteries. And the cost of batteries, I want to say the number I've heard is somewhere between 5 to 8% per year. The cost of the batteries is going down. So it's just like computers. I mean, it's everything like that. As the technology gets better, they can make them for less expensive, as long as the supply chain can stay strong.
Just final thoughts here. I mean, we have the microchip shortage. You said you have about 4 vehicles on your lot. We were chatting in the break with all these, pre-ordered. If people are on the market for a car right now, and if they're thinking about electric, just sort of big picture, when you have that conversation across the table with your family, what do you see in car world happening right now and maybe in the near future?
I mean, I think COVID is still having a big effect on the car industry. It's shutting down chip manufacturing plants all across the world, and it's causing the world of cars. It's not like it used to be. You can't just walk into a car dealership right now and pick out from 35 different cars of the same model of exactly what you want. You're going to have to be more patient. You're going to want to plan ahead. If you have a lease return, for example, that's coming up early next year, you want to start looking now, because you might have to order a car now in order to get a car by the time that car is ready to come up. So you just got to be more prepared for it, and be prepared to be a little patient. And bear with us, we're trying our best, and the manufacturers are trying their best too.
Times are definitely changing in so many parts of our world, including automotive. So Jeff Miller, General Manager of Mark Miller Subaru. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. We really appreciate your insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks again. We are going to return after the break with more on the future of electric vehicles. Welcome back to our In Focus discussion on electric vehicles. Now, EVs, they're part of a larger conversation about our big picture infrastructure, the environment. We do want to talk about this now. James Campbell, Director of Innovation and Sustainability for Rocky Mountain Power. James, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's just talk generally about what you do every day. But the first question, kind of the need to support this growing EV industry and Rocky Mountain Power's role in that support, right? It's not just about buying a car, it's about what this means for all of Utah. So what are the discussions happening at Rocky Mountain Power?
Yeah, it's infrastructure is a big issue and a big component of electric vehicles. And at Rocky Mountain Power, we see the future, we see it coming. So we definitely have an important part of that as being the largest electric provider in the state of Utah. So we're pretty excited, and we want to do our part and be helpful and really come out. And one of the big changes we're seeing in the last few years is electric vehicles in the state has moved from about 0.2% to 3%. That's a big jump, and so we've been pretty helpful in terms of helping that by providing infrastructure. But now, as we're looking from another 3% to a much greater of 30%, that's a whole nother ball game, and so we're definitely going to have be a part of that.
So 30%, is that the prognostication for what time frame is that going to be?
Yeah, well, right, it's the crystal ball. If you can, different models, different organizations like that. But I think in the next 10 years, 30% is probably realistic, especially with changes in battery prices. You're seeing technological advances, and Tesla being the largest, most valuable automaker in the world, and there's a reason for that, is because they've invested in technology, and so because of that, I think 30% is very realistic.
Okay, so let's talk about the infrastructure that you've put in place, that you're planning to put in place for these electric vehicles. Obviously, electricity isn't free. I don't drive one, so does it cost money to plug your vehicle in now? Are these your charging stations? Are you going to be a part of this, or Obviously, as Rocky Mountain Power, you probably just provide the electricity. But for someone who sounds like they don't know a whole lot about these charging stations, what does it look like now, and then what does the future look like as far as infrastructure goes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've been supportive of putting in chargers to date, and a lot of chargers that have already been put out have been kind of along the interstates. And there's two different types of chargers, what they call level 2, that's a slower charge, and a fast charge, or a DC fast charger. But we're looking to really be aggressive and put out these ultra fast chargers, and we're looking to do it along the Wasatch Front. We're also looking to do it, to put about 20 to 25 of these locations with about 4 ultra fast chargers, so about 100 fast chargers across the state along the Wasatch Front. And then also in the rural areas, out in Delta, you can go to the West Desert, down in Penguich and Springdale and Moab and Vernal. So really you can go anywhere across the state and you can get an ultra fast charge. And this is a big change because it'll really speed up that process. So when you go and kind of refill the fuel in your vehicle with these ultra extreme fast chargers, it'll be just like today. It'll take you 10 to 20 minutes to get 100 miles or so, or 100 to 200 miles. So it'll really change it. And in the terms of who's going to pay for it, the user's going to pay for the electricity. As you were mentioning, electricity's not free. And so I know for early adopters, a lot of businesses were giving out level 2 chargers for free, but I think moving forward, the users are going to be paying for this.
Okay, I run a business along I-15. I go to Rocky Mountain Power. It says, put the charger at my business. How does that work? How do you decide where these chargers go? What are the inside politics around that? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, when we were looking at those, where to put those, we wanted to make sure it was filling in gaps across the state. We didn't want to be redundant. So we were looking for locations where there aren't these ultra fast chargers. We were looking for those first. And then along the Wasatch Front, we were looking at, well, where are communities where we're seeing growth, particularly in apartments? Because those are folks who potentially could use these extreme ultra fast chargers because they may not have the ability to charge at home. Because most people will charge at home or they'll charge at work. So we wanted to make sure that those who don't have that access can get that. Then we also looked at some of the rural areas to where you can go to destinations, whether that's the national parks or recreation areas. We wanted to make sure that you can go anywhere you wanted to go.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about final thoughts. What do you want to talk to in regards to electric vehicles that we haven't addressed yet? Because a lot of folks usually think, okay, the government's going to be way behind. You have all this technological innovation. They're going to catch up slowly. Rocky Mountain Power's role in bridging that gap as we look to the future.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned in your earlier segment, but really the cost of electricity is so much cheaper than the cost of gasoline. And so you're going to see a pretty big improvement in that. It's going to be roughly around $1 a gallon equivalent, roughly in that, if you wanted to fill up at one of these fast chargers. So that's going to be a big impact. Also, the operational cost, that gets lost quite a bit, is that these you don't have to do maintenance on. That you can, it's like your refrigerator. You have a refrigerator for 15 years, it's an electric motor, you never touch it, and you don't have to do any maintenance. And so these electric vehicles are really going to change the driving experience, both in terms of cheaper, and it's also a lot of fun to drive.
Right, you think about the gas and then the oil changes and that maintenance going out the window. Pretty fascinating future as we look ahead. So you've been hearing from James Campbell, Director of Innovation and Sustainability for Rocky Mountain Power. James, again, we really appreciate you coming down to the studio to talk about your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to be right back with more discussion on the expanding market of electric cars. That is after the break. And welcome back to our conversation tonight about electric vehicles. Pretty fascinating here. Joining us now for our next segment, Ashley Miller, Executive Director for Breathe Utah. Ashley, we appreciate you joining us in the conversation tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's talk about air quality along the Wasatch Front, right? What percentage of pollutants come from our traditional vehicles from these tailpipes?
So it's about half. When we talk about the sources of pollution, tailpipe pollution coming from our passenger cars and trucks makes up about half of the pollution for the whole picture along the Wasatch Front.
So it's kind of a complicated picture here when we talk about electric vehicles, who can afford them, some of the socioeconomic discussions. We can get into that in a second. But what impact would it be to have more electric vehicles on the road? I guess to the extent that it would make a difference in our pollution. What numbers do you look at? What are your sort of future forecasts?
So the Division of Air Quality does the modeling, and it's a really good question to ask. It's hard to say a number of electric vehicles that will reduce the number of red air days or high ozone level days. But we can learn a lot from COVID, where when we saw cars coming off the road and people staying home, pollution decreased significantly. And so if we replace some of these older, dirtier cars with electric vehicles, we'll have a similar outcome from that. And Utahns typically drive older vehicles, and newer gasoline and diesel cars are cleaner than their older vehicles, but electric vehicle, you have zero emissions from the tailpipe. So that's a really crucial step for the continued progress for the state.
Okay, so that's on the pollution side, which I'm sure we're going to get back to. But yeah, let's just talk about electric vehicles. They're not cheap. Who's buying them? Are there socioeconomic issues around who can afford them, who can't, and what this means for the future of Utah?
In the past few years, you've seen a lot of Teslas out there. You've seen the Nissan Leaf, maybe the little BMW. And yes, wealthier, more affluent people were definitely the ones purchasing those. But as more major car companies now are coming out and moving towards electric and improving the technology, you're going to have a lot more choices. And so I think that will really broaden the range of consumers who can purchase them.
Well, when we look at the legislature then, because more and more consumers are going to purchase them, we've seen bills in the state legislature, that would tax electric cars to pay for road maintenance, because obviously a gas tax isn't very effective if there's not as much gas being sold, or none at all, but probably won't happen at the extreme there. But you've been involved in these discussions, right? Give us an idea about what some of these discussions around electric vehicles and taxing those are all about.
This is a really tough thing to tackle. The gas tax has long not done its job of paying for road infrastructure and maintenance. But the problem with the bills in the past that have tried to increase the fees on registration for electric vehicles is it really does send the wrong message about how serious the state is for air quality, because the fees generated from electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles and plug-ins from these additional increased fees really wouldn't even scrape the surface of one road project. It's very expensive. And so a lot of work needs to go in to figure out how to pay for the roads. But for now, it seems silly to put this very expensive fee on an electric vehicle and not really look at the bigger picture. They're not going after the very fuel efficient gas and diesel cars, but yet someone who has a hybrid vehicle that might not get great gas mileage, like an SUV, they're going to pay an additional fee just because. And so it really does, there is a problem that needs to be solved, but increasing registration fees is really hard. And it's also another barrier. They talk about increasing a fee on an electric vehicle $300. If you're paying for gas tax, you don't even realize that you're paying for it at the pump. It's built into every gallon of gas that you buy, whereas when you go to pay your registration, this is going to be an additional fee on top of the already fees and taxes that you are paying annually in one lump sum. So it could mean that a new electric vehicle might cost you $600 up front every year one time. And that is definitely a challenge for many people. It might not hurt the people who are buying Teslas, but it will hurt the people that are trying to get into an affordable electric vehicle to, for their commute or whatever it may be.
Right, so there's another barrier there possibly. It seems so simple, right? We like to think about things in black and white, put everything in a box, whatever. So it's electric, it's great for the environment, the air quality is better. But then you look at kind of mining for lithium or some of the natural resources that are taxed in making electric cars. Is there a balance there? Is electric still far better? What are some of the nuances that maybe you're concerned about?
You really have to look at the whole picture, and I don't think we know the answers to that yet. The mining issues are huge. Is there unethical mining going on? Is there child mining going on to source the metals that are needed for this? And then what about the end of the life cycle of these electric vehicles and their batteries? So I think it's like everything with air quality. There's no silver bullet. There's no perfect solution. But I think as we start looking at the bigger ozone problem that the state is facing right now, we're going to have to find solutions everywhere we possibly can. And certainly zero emissions at the tailpipe is definitely part of the strategy long term.
So if you could snap your fingers, have every car electric, is that what you would prefer?
That's a tough way. It's a tough thing to answer because, you know, gas cars are very clean. I think the real key here is getting the older cars off the road. If you look at, you know, if you're driving around in a year 2000 car, new cars are like 98% cleaner. And so yes, an electric vehicle is zero emission, but the better emissions control technology in the cars are making it easier. But the one thing electric has over gas and diesel is there is no emissions control in the car, right? And so if your catalytic converter goes bad and you don't replace it, your car might be a lot dirtier than it should be running. You don't have that with electric vehicles. So again, I think it's just one piece of an overall strategy, but I think it's you know, definitely worth trying to get more of these cars on Utah's roads for sure.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. Final thoughts?
You know, I just think that all of the partnerships with the utility and the state's investment in electric vehicle charging infrastructure, I think that we're going in the right direction. And the car manufacturers coming out with more choices for consumers. I think that we're going towards, you know, better air every year here in Utah. And I look forward to just having more choices out there for people and getting some of the anxiety and fears taken away.
Ending our segment here on a positive note, a little optimism. Well, I appreciate that. Ashley Miller, Executive Director for Breathe Utah. Ashley, thanks so much for talking about electric vehicles in a nuanced way. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, appreciate that again. So don't forget, folks, we'd love to hear from you about the show. Join our Facebook group by searching ABC4 and Focus. Send us an email, infocus@abc4.com.